Good day, Europe. Good evening, Asia. Thanks for joining us. It's been a while since we've been online with these webinars. So if you've been here before, welcome back. If it's your first time, welcome and thanks for joining. My name is Rob Straw. I'm the CEO of SEEPS Europe and the Zurich campus. I'm sitting in my office in Horgen, Switzerland on the lake. It's cold and dreary. That's why I'm putting a screenshot behind me to protect it. I'm very, very glad that you're here. This is part of our SEEPS Lesson for Leaders webinar series that we've been running for quite some time. Today, we have the pleasure to be talking with Karl Schädler about the topic of succession planning. What does a failed succession plan cost? That's one way to look at it, about the good planning versus not good planning. How can emotions be helpful in this process? As we were planning this, and I was reflecting back about they all happen to be men, who were what I call Nachkriegstüftler, men that started their companies just after World War II in Germany. And the way that they handled succession and succession planning was very, the range of how they handled it was very, very broad. Some did it extremely well. Some did it extremely poorly. And emotions always played a big role. Only 1 in 5 succession plans is successful. 1 in 5. So why do you think, if you're running your own family firm, why do you think you're going to do it better? Only in a few cases is the follow-up process, which is initiated at an early stage, carried on. This is all the more surprising given that most business owners don't know that succession planning takes actually a lot of time and a lot of preparation. In fact, years, maybe even decades in advance. Again, I'm just reflecting about another firm, a Swiss firm that handed over its reins. The father handed over the reins to the children, in this particular case to the children. And it was very messy in the beginning until they had an expert come in and help them deal with the emotional side of things. The emotional separation from the company is often very underestimated. Most of these people have spent their life dedicated to this work. It's almost like a work of art for them, not just a business. This has a lasting negative impact on important customer relationships if we're not careful, and the value of the company. You can't teach a person anything. You can only help him discover it in him or herself. Galileo Galilei said this quite a few hundred years ago. I've known Karl Schädler since the mid-90s. He's a private banker with his heart and his soul. He's managing partner at Cottonfield Family Office since 2013. He has many, many years of leadership experience and experience of servicing entrepreneurs, executive board members, family offices, and premium clients, working at the likes of Bank Loy or Coloriden Loy, and then Credit Suisse later. He has more than 25 years in asset management, investment banking, and private banking experience. This is his blood. This is what he does. He has an MBA at the highest in financial services and insurance, and he's a certified financial planner. He's a trusted advisor. So I'm very, very glad to have him here. He's also a partner at Expert for Leaders AG, and he's on multiple senior board member of private and medium-sized companies based in Switzerland in the areas of real estate and finance, particularly. During the time when he's speaking, I do encourage you to use the Q&A chat function or raise your hand during this, and we will let you enter you into conversation with you during this. You don't have to wait until the very end to ask during the Q&A. We're also going to have that, but if you have a pressing question, type it in the chat and we'll have a look at it. We want this to be interactive. It should not be a static presentation from Karl, because it is having to deal with very dynamic topics. Before I hand the floor over to Karl, I'd like to conduct a very short poll to see how you are, the audience, the participants, how you're doing. Poll question 1, Elizabeth, if you could pull that up. How much experience have you had with the topic of succession planning? None, some, a lot. I'm trying to keep this simple so that Karl can adjust his inputs. I see some people on the call that I recognize and know that you have actually even a lot of experience on this. So welcome, people. Men like Teo Staub, welcome. How much experience have you had with the topic of succession planning and succession management? None, some, and a lot. Okay, let's leave it there. 84% of you participated. 38% of you have said none. 38% have said some, and 25% have had a lot. So, Karl, you've got a difficult job with talking to people with no experience, with people that can be speaking in your shoes as well, who are actually working in the same space that you are and are learning. The next question I have is another poll question, if we can follow up, especially for those of you who have had experience about succession planning or have heard about succession planning. How would you rate the whole process on a scale of 1 to 10, or the stories that you've heard about people that have been involved with this process? Has it been a good process? Has it been a okay? Has it been awful? Has it been great? And these are not leading. We want to know what this audience has to say. We know what the statistics say across the board with succession planning and M&A and things like that. It's not the best statistics we have, even though there's a lot of hubris around this topic. Okay. For those of you who have had experience with succession planning or had some exposure to it, how would you rate the whole process on a scale of 1 to 5? Okay, let's leave it at that. Let's show the poll, Elizabeth. 7. 42% have said, 43% have said good or great, but great, only 7%. Awful, no one. Poor, 21. Okay-ish, 36. And why is this? Well, and what can you do about it? That's why we're here. This is why we've invited Karl, with his 25 years of experience working with this, to talk about these topics. How do we move from awful or poor to good to great? Karl, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Rob. You can hear me, everybody? Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Rob, for this kind introduction. Probably you've already done the whole work with your introduction, but I tried to add some good slides and to share some information. Thank you also to SIPS for this great opportunity to talk about this crucial topic, succession planning, and also from my side, a warm welcome all over the world. For the next 20 minutes, I will give you some insights, and I'm looking forward to a lively discussion. As Rob already mentioned, to get an interactive session, you may interrupt me and ask questions at any time. Let's go direct to the topic of today. I know everybody these days is talking about succession planning, and countless advisors and events have investigated this topic. Therefore, I will not bore you, but talk about the completely underestimated topic from my point of view. How much does fail the succession plan cost, and why emotions can be helpful? I think we should start first of all with facts and figures. And what for me was very impressive this year, also under the condition of Corona, the world's merger and acquisition activities in 2021 so far are exceeding the all-time record set in 2015. So there is quite a lot of activities in this field. And in Switzerland, we have roughly 90,000 SMEs, or 15.1% of the overall SMEs in Switzerland which have an unclear succession situation, and they must solve this challenge within the next few years. And last but not least, what makes me really sad and is also topic to talk about this situation is that only 1 in 5 succession plans is successful, because I hardly can imagine that this situation is affordable for the future. Maybe you think succession planning is just a process,
Karl,
and therefore quite easy.
Can I interrupt for a second? Sometimes we're critical about the data. So you've got data for Switzerland and Germany. Do you have any data showing more global data about the 1 in 5?
I talked to the consultant agencies, and they said me it's more or less the same all over the world, especially for the US, not for Asia.
Okay.
And therefore, I'm looking forward for a lively discussion to get more inputs also from the Asia side.
Great. Okay.
And
so if
we have 25 quite experienced quote in this discussion. So I hope we share then also the situation in Asia, which is not, from my side, not quite comparable with the old Europe and the US situation. Is this okay so for you?
That's great. I like that. I like this. I think that it does make us reflect a little bit.
Yeah.
If this is the case, 1 in 5 in Asia, 1 in 5 in Europe and in the US, plus minus, but Asia doesn't follow this. Maybe some experts from Asia have some ideas to why they have better success in Asia with succession planning. It's not the topic of today, but it's always interesting to learn how to do this generally better, right? So Karl, keep going.
As I mentioned, if you think succession planning is just a process and therefore must be easy, believe me, you are definitely wrong. It's unbelievably complex because first of all, you and probably your family should agree on the priority goal to reach. And there are only 4 of them on this slide. Probably fairness and equality is the leading goal of the process, or preservation of family wealth as the most important goal. Get out the max in a transaction. So what does it mean? Financial goals are above the stakeholder goals. Then one of the most important goals in Europe, you can say, is keep the family business family owned. And we talk about the generation contract. And family peace and harmony as the most important goal is quite often also a goal which is really hard to reach. You can say to find a common solution or a goal is a Herculean task. Just a little taste what really happens in life and in succession planning, and why succession planning can be so difficult. There we have some reason, some explanation why only 1 in 5 is successful. And therefore it would be interesting, the one who said they haven't seen a poor succession planning is one of the reasons here on this slide, probably one you faced during you were part of the succession plan or you guided the succession plan. Because we always have the high hurdle of the communication culture, that everybody is able to talk and to talk on the eyes level, on the same level. That's very important. Yeah. Do you have any, Rob, so far? Do you have any reactions?
Well, if it's so easy, why do we get it so wrong? I mean, when I read the slides when you first sent them to us, I scratch my head. It's actually it's business, right? Yes, it's family, but somehow we can't bring those two together very often or very
Yeah.
well. Somehow,
Well,
if it's just about communication, sorry, why I don't get it. Why are we so bad at this? Why is it? Yeah.
well, let's go on the next slide. Just a little taste what really happens in life. We have seen, if we talk about succession planning, I think the focus usually is on the next generation. How can they be taught to take on this responsible task? And what education and professional experience do they need to follow in big footsteps and become successful? As you can see here at Cottonfield, we do absolutely the same. This is our 3E model, and we use this to help to climb the ladder from the informed to the in charge situation. But you ask why so difficult? And if we start this process, we are often confronted with high expectations combined with the boast of the outgoing generation that they know exactly how things should be done. We also face quite often a zero tolerance for errors. And this often accompanied by unwillingness to go down new paths. So you see, even if you take this in consideration, it couldn't be an easy process.
Mhm.
And therefore, many hesitate from the successors. Therefore, many hesitate because they can't gauge whether they can master this Herculean task. I often asked myself why succession planning hasn't focused much earlier and more strongly on the outgoing person, the strong personality, the successful entrepreneur. This is probably because the outgoing person starts the process and their rule and expectations lay the foundation for the succession process. This can make it seem that the outgoing person has already answered all their own questions and doesn't need any help. But in reality, however, my experience has been very different. Regardless whether you are looking for a successor within the family or thinking about engaging an external manager, imagine yourself in the shoes of an actor who plays the leading role for the last time. And here you can see the crucial questions are in this red field. What does this do to you? What emotions are stirred deep within you? What does this, and this is important, to your self-image, self-perception, self-confidence, and ego? So, from my side, a succession process should always begin with the preface, should start by answering these exact questions and determining the personal and emotional point for departure.
Well, I think again, the mix between Karl, the rational and the emotional. Clearly, you've got to have the rational approach to it, but it sounds like you're saying that most are not addressing the emotional journey any very well. And maybe that's the real answer between why only 1 in 5 really are making it.
Yeah, because it's so complex.
But if I go to,
Yeah, let me just answer you.
yeah,
Because it's so complex, everybody is focused on the process, to set up a clear process.
mm,
And it's so hard to start an open discussion with the outgoing person and to ask him, have you already done your housekeeping? Have you already answered your question? And I can tell you, many entrepreneurs find it hard to think about leaving their business when they have poured their heart and soul into it for so many years. And as a result, planning for an eventual transition is often left to the last minute, because they think we have just done the process, we have just the work done, and then I think about my personal situation and what I will do for the future. And so they look for succession planning strategies for business owners. And believe me, you will find countless of them. But as I mentioned before, all focused on the transaction. But, and this is the point, what really matters at this time is a strategy to manage the transition to retirement, or in other words, from meaningful work to meaning in life at retirement. And at this time at Cottonfield, we refer to the owner strategy. Probably you know this term from entrepreneurial challenges, but you can use it also for every personal change. From the point of view of an entrepreneur, this means my life belongs to me. I'm the owner, and such as should first be clear, both on the personal and the professional level, about what, how, and why I want to start the process. Therefore, a good reason to start with oneself, to train and become rationally and emotionally fit for the dialogue between the generations. This could help to avoid uncertainties, irritation, and being fearful of the future, which often is expressed in reluctance or a zigzag course during the succession process. At this time, Rob, again, the question, do you have already any questions, reactions?
I had a question. You know, I work with a couple of people that are actually in the second generation or even in third generation. And the issue is not so much is who starts the conversation. You know, it's easy to go to the owner, and you might say it's easy to go to the owner, and the owner should drive the conversation. But what happens if she doesn't want to, and she's
Yeah,
not willing to? How do the offspring, and let's say in this particular case, the family or the management, how do they, if it's a management who's thinking about, maybe doing something with this firm, if how do you go about this? And who starts this? If the owner doesn't is thinking just gonna keep doing this till I'm dead, often they're driving the value of that company down over time because they don't have the energy, the stamina, or whatever it might be to keep it up, especially in those last years. So I'm just wondering, it's easy to say, well, it needs to be addressed by the owner. However, the Nachkommen, or the generations after, or the managers who may be taking over, how do they do that? And how do you go about this?
okay. If the owner isn't ready for a discussion, if he's not willing to hand over because he thinks I'm fit and ready and I will do the same job also for the next couple of years, Probably it's helpful just to know that the transition process, it can take up to 5 to 10 years. And if we talk about family business, it can even last more than 10 years.
Yeah.
So it's not only one question, are you ready or are you willing? It also has to be a communication process within the family. And if you see here, we have, or let me get back to this slide. If you see here, as an external trusted advisor, we can address this topic in the family and investment conferences. We make sure that everybody is listening and exact the same eye level, because this is also a crucial topic to get on the same eye level for the discussion.
Mm-hmm.
And it needs an invitation from the parents, from the owner, to participate in this process. If he doesn't want, then often only a health issue may change his mind or give him a mind shift to this topic. It's not so easy just to go up to the owner and tell him now it's time to hand over and I'm ready. That's not the right way. Definitely not. And what I think is, if you have reached this same eye level and everybody, all which are involved in the process, are clear about their expectations, wishes and aspirations, and can formulate this honestly with unvarnished openness from the start of the succession process, then I think you are on a prospective and successful part. And this is the goal to reach. The goal is the path you go together. And finally, should it be to hand over and to give the owner, the parents, the outgoing person, the freedom to do other things in the third step of life and hand over the business in hands which are ready and willing to keep it on. Probably the experienced one have some additional points. What we can do if there is no willingness for a discussion or to open a process.
That's a question for the audience.
Yep.
Yep. What do you do when the principal is not willing to have the discussion? How do you begin this? Does anyone from the audience would like to share some experiences or expertise on this topic? So Ulrich, let's see what Ulrich says. I'm going to pull Ulrich.
Yeah.
Ulrich says, talk to someone who's close to the owner, who has trust to his wife or his friend.
It's always helpful if you have.
Ulrich, I just brought you into the conversation. Would you like to join the conversation with us about this? Thanks.
Yes,
Hi.
hello, Ulrich.
Hello, Karl.
You mentioned that it's always helpful to have a direct access to a trusted person.
Yeah, I think so. I had a case, well, at the end, it was still not successful, I have to admit, but I think it's important to for the owner to have somebody he trusts and he listens to. If he doesn't want to listen to the young generation, maybe somebody has to make him aware of the risks, and also that it has some positive aspects for him when he can let loose and hand it over to the next generation.
Yeah.
If the generation cannot do it, the young generation cannot do by themselves, because they're seen as a kind of beneficiaries, and the owner doesn't want to listen to them. Maybe somebody who has a more neutral position and has the trust of the owner could be very helpful.
Yeah. In my experience, the most important person in such a process, if we talk about the hardliner owner, is the wife, because she spent all life together with him. She knows him from scratch, and she can tell him things you as an external expert will never be in the position to address. But that's the reason why I said before, I think the preface is the most important and is so crucial for a successful process, because if the couple, the parents, are on the same level and they have dreams and they have input for a meaningful life, then I think you will then have the occasion also to open from the bottom up a discussion. But as Ulrich mentioned, I think you always need somebody who is building a bridge to the person and bringing the information why it should be now the time to think about, not to act. Because as I mentioned before, the preface is the most important.
Karl,
so why is it now the moment to think about change and change management? Yeah.
I invited George into the call as well. George wrote, I'd recommend that all the successors collectively approach the owner. George, would you like to comment on this?
Hi, George.
Hi, everybody. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, I would recommend that depends on the circumstances and maybe also on the phase the business is in. You know, how many successors and children and cousins or whatever else is there. Maybe approach this issue collectively so that they meet and find a way to tell their part, how they see the future and the risks involved, and do it as a first step, just to show the owner kind of like that this is a matter they are thinking about and that it's not the big elephant in the room, because probably the owner also thinks about it as well. So that might be a strategy that could help help this delicate situation.
Karl, from your experience, what do you see as upside and downside from this sort of approach?
As we started the discussion, if somebody is definitely not willing to talk about, to think about, or to start a process, then it's hardly possible to get in a good mood and to open a successful process. And therefore, I always say heroes ask for help. So heroes, they definitely see that their life will end sometime, and that they have especially in the third part of the life cycle, they have to add something else to their life than only work, business, and growth. But if you have, how you say, the dinosaur,
The dinosaurs, yeah.
If you have such an owner, and I just can say, then the process started when he have gone. So that's the other possibility, to do nothing till this sad moment. And then most of time, the successors have to start unprepared, to take over the responsibility. That's definitely only the second best solution for a succession planning process.
So it's really interesting, you know, Karl, when we had lunch recently, one of the things I picked up in our discussion was how much of this is, you know, in your early days of a banker, it had to do so much about transactions, and deal. And now, as you have grown into this, especially in the family office and succession planning expertise, you become a psychologist more than a banker. Is that right?
You have to be a little bit both.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you've got to have the technical answers. Absolutely.
Because you have to learn to listen first. Not to offer a solution, but sit together and keep your eyes and ears open and watch and listen to the people involved in the process. Give them, even if they are not able to speak in groups, give them a voice, help them to transfer the information to the group, the family, and try to get them definitely involved on. And then I'm back again. It needs the same eye level for everybody who's involved in this process.
Yeah.
And probably you need a little bit more soft skills than just knowledge and trading experience to support and to guide such a process. But I think, and this is especially from my point of view, I ever say I'm not a coach. I'm not a psychologist. I have common sense and open eyes and ears, and I can support with my background. But if you face the situation that you are convinced that you need external help, external specialists, then it's definitely time to integrate them in the process and not to go on, meaning that you can also do this work for the process. So I always say we know what we are good in, but we also know where our limits are, and this is also important. I think then you definitely support and you definitely involve specialists and additional skills for a successful succession plan.
Have you seen any, you know, when I see this, yes, trusted advisor, maybe it's not the same as a coach, as a psychologist, but that ability to listen and be empathetic and nurture, along with, you know, the emotional as well as the rational answers, the solutions that you're trying to ease for companies into, families especially. But during the COVID, have you seen that this has been more challenging because of distance and time and only being able to meet a lot of people on Zoom and things? I would expect so.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
The distance, the virtual sessions, they can't replace a personal meeting. And in a virtual session, you can discuss topics from a rational way, but it's not the best aspect to discuss soft skills, to let emotions run. So yeah, it was quite a little bit more challenging to get in this personal touch. But you have phone, you have Zoom, and it was also possible for those who live in Switzerland to meet outside, to go on a stroll together, yet to look for this personal contact and discussions. And I hope so. We will end up as soon as possible in the situation that we definitely live the new normal, and will not have a lockdown again. Yeah. So to end up with my presentation, I would take on the last slide. That's what we discussed before, is you have probably know your limits, and you have probably involve external specialists, and then you act as a team and support this process. And the last slide, sorry for all of you, honestly, I don't know what it cost, and you don't have any figures available what it cost these 4 failed succession plans. But what I definitely know is every failed succession plan is always too expensive and have sustained negative effects on important customers, customer relationships, and the value of the company. And last but not least, you often have damages also in the family life. And this cost you can't quantify, but they are huge, and they should be not as a target to reach, not be effective in such, or as end up as a result in such a process. And what I definitely can say, 1 in 5 is definitely not affordable for the future. Yeah.
Thanks. I have a question. I'm thinking about 2 families that I've been a part of from the distance in the last 10 years, where, you know, everything was set, everything was talked about, the good relationships. They handled it well on the tactical side about, you know, certain things happening and triggering at certain dates. And then the guy, the owner, founder, and that's the thing too. I think owner founders versus just owners are a lot more difficult to deal with, rather than say a 3rd generation. So, and this one guy that I know very well, he just couldn't step back, even though it was agreed to. He's still coming to the office, still trying to tell people what to do, still just could not do it. I'm sure you've experienced this too, especially where it's been the founder owner. Very delicate, very delicate. Legally, of course, you can just throw him out, you know, take his keys away and not let him have access to the plant or the whatever anymore. But that's not going to work.
Not the way.
That's not the way.
That's not the way.
I mean, I'm sure you've had these type of experiences. What do you do then? What do you tell the family? What do you tell the founder, what do you tell them?
If you have tried all aspects we discussed today, and you end up in the same situation, he's not willing, he's not prepared to discuss, to even to think about such a process, then you have to break up. It's then not the situation given to start such a process. You will fail, and
But the family,
probably, as I mentioned before, these are the owners or the founders. They think I live for
forever,
any time,
yeah.
and I have no health issues, and I will be able to run the company for the next couple of years, for the next 10 years. Then it's definitely not the time to discuss or to start succession.
Okay. It's difficult there with, it's in many cases it's dad, and dad just, you know what I mean? It's not just owner founder. This is dad. And how do you deal with dad? And and it's not very challenging, very, very challenging. And basically you've got to say you've got to put business first or put family first in that situation. Either you continue to suffer and let that happen, and on the business side, but to protect the relationship, it's very delicate. I'd like to go back to George. George asks a very interesting question. In a succession planning scenario where there's already a professional management in place, how can the family stay or get back in the business and keep control?
You have several possibilities to keep and take on the control, especially if the family is in the board of directors involved. So they give clear instruction to the management, and they control the management. And therefore, the board of directors is steering the company finally. Okay. And if you are not part of the board of directors, then you have to approach them.
Okay.
Because if we have a family-owned business, then it's normally given that the owner is the chairman and some friends are involved, or even if he's better positioned, then you have specialists in the board. But they are ready, and they have to support the company and to do everything for this company to evolve in a good way. So that's also the topic that they have to approach the founder and the owner for starting a discussion.
Great, thanks.
So they are from a legally side, they are in the position that they have to ask this question: what will be when? And that's what we do as a family office also.
Sure.
We ask the owner, the founder, parents, the person that is going out, we ask them always, what will be when? Are you prepared? Do you need help? And to end up again, if somebody definitely is not willing, then
sure. Can you go back to this?
You have to leave him.
Yeah,
so,
sure.
Yeah.
Can you go back to slide 6 for a second?
Yeah.
I like this list a lot. Yeah,
this one.
Yeah, this one. So when I was reading through this, I'm thinking, wow, my goodness, this is like a Pandora's box.
Yeah, it is.
So again, you've been doing this a long time. Which of these do you feel like is the biggest deal breaker in your experience, just looking, again, without a research base or anything, but if you think back, things that's worked and not worked, what's the biggest deal breaker you've seen consistently?
A lack of communication culture.
So,
if the generations are not able to talk to each other, not listen, not accept. So a lack of communication culture is definitely a hard hurdle or a high hurdle to overcome.
I begin to wonder, and we come back, and we've got about 5 or 6 minutes left, and I begin to think about what you said earlier, is that this is less the case in Asia. It seems to be a little bit smoother in Asia than in, let's say, Europe or the US. When I look at Europe, every generation lives for itself. I don't take care of my parents. I put them into a home. My kids leave the house pretty early. We live very much individualistically versus this communal thinking in Asia, where you see multi-generation houses, 3-4 generations taking care of one generation to the other, where there's a sort of a natural flow of communication if you're in the same house. I would guess that's the situation. Do you see any resonance? Does this resonate with you, of maybe why this focus on community and in Asia maybe being a reason why there's better communication than in the West?
I'm not sure. Let's ask this question to the Asian participants. Do they think that they have a better communication culture? But what I can tell you is we often have in family conference the situation that the successors raise their hands and give some information, and then immediately the father or the owner said, "Listen, you told me this several things several times. I'm not interested in hearing that again." And then you have to stop this conversation and say, "Listen, we have some rules on the family conference.
Right.
And if you don't listen to your son or to your daughter, then listen to me, and I will tell you what's the meaning of this information is." So then you have to probably break up, to separate, and to start a discussion in a one-to-one situation and tell him that's not the way that we go on, and that's not the way that is supportive for this situation. And this helps. Normally this helps.
Does anyone in the audience, in the participants, have any experience, my thought about the community and the communal thinking in Asia maybe being a reason why it's working better with the handover and succession planning and management versus, say, the West, where it's more individualistic? Be interested if anyone has any experience or thoughts. I'm sure this has been studied. I just popped up as it came up in the discussion. And then we've got a question under the Q&A. Tell me one good reason, the best reason why I need a family office to help me do my succession planning, or an external expert to do this.
If you take in consideration that this process lasts 5 up to 10 years, and you start with, according to the Cottonfield model, you start with the information part. Then you need somebody who is working on this information and preparing the family conferences. So you need an external one who is running these sessions and who's responsible and is doing the follow-up aspects to make sure that there is, after a family conversation, not a break. So to make sure that the speed is, that keep up the speed in this process. And then you get over from the information to the involvement situation.
Mm-hmm.
So you are already invited to think and to add information to the family part. And therefore, it's always very helpful if you have somebody who helps you to structure your input, to work together with you on this topic, and to support you also to add this information part in the family conference. So you should be the trusted advisor of all involved people.
Mm-hmm.
You're not the one who's running the process. So you are always the trusted advisor and the one who supports the process.
Mm.
And I think, therefore, it could be very helpful to have an external one or to have an external team to support this process. And if you think about, I've experienced family sessions where they ended up crying crowd, and then you have stop and separate and cool down the emotions, get them back on the table, and do the family conference. That's also, if the family is alone, then it's ended up with crying. If you have an external one, then you have the chance to cool down the emotions and to bring back everybody to the table for a successful and prospective family conference. Then that's the most, from my side, that's the most important part why you should involve an external specialist. It's like in football. You can play football without the man in black, the man with the pipe. But if you don't agree, you need the expert.
So it's an interesting metaphor, and I'm very cognizant of time. We're running out of time, but I just want to address that very briefly. You don't see the family manager as being the coach. You see it as being the referee between the different teams.
Yeah, he has different hats on. So sometimes you are the trusted advisors, and in some situations you are the referee, or you have to be the referee.
Mm-hmm.
You have to add a clear communication.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you are also friend and
consigliere, right?
Yeah.
Karl, we're out of time. Thank you very, very much for your insights. I know we could keep talking about this. The idea is to have a sampling about this topic of succession planning and the role of emotions. I've learned a lot about this. Just the rational side is very clear, but the emotional side is the most challenging part about moving forward with succession planning, on successful succession planning to manage the emotional process going forward. Thank you very much for your time and your preparation for today. Dear participants, also thank you for your insights and your questions. Thank you for your participation. Thanks again, Karl. Dear audience, I look forward to see you again soon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you to all of you for having me, and wishing you a good time.